Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of Tea with EC, where I get to talk to you about folklore creatures, big and small, dangerous and not quite so dangerous. That's a very small spectrum. That's a spectrum on the dangerous end. If you've been checking my social media this week, you will know that we have a pretty definitive theme for May, which is in keeping with my favourite time of year to illustrate things, Mermaid, where we illustrate and talk about mermaids during May. So last week we had a chat about the Benvarri and the Dinimara, the mermaids from the Isle of Man. This week we're broadening that up a bit more generally to talk about mermaids all around the British Isles, with the exception of some of the Irish mermaids, which we will talk about in a couple of weeks' time. I'm going to take 2 weeks to cover mermaids in their entirety. Actually, that's ludicrous. Mermaids, there are so many diverse stories of mermaids. There's no way we could cover it in their entirety. But I'm going to take 2 weeks to talk through a focus on the dangers of mermaids this week and a focus on some of the gentler sides of mermaids next week. Bearing in mind that mermaids are not known for gentleness. So, as always, we will run through this in terms of how to identify a mermaid. I suspect you guys have already got this one. Where might you find a mermaid? Are they dangerous? How to survive an encounter with one? And story time. So, how to identify a mermaid? Human upper body, fish tail, pretty standard. There is a, the Highland mermaid is called the Kiask. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not. Anyone who speaks Scots, just message and correct me. And the Kiask is known to have a tail like a young salmon. And some stories suggest that she can take it off like a selkie skin and become fully human. But as a general rule, mermaids are stuck being mermaids. While most mermaids are human-sized, which contributes to a lot of the stories about them, some of the ancient Celtic legends about mermaids have them as absolute monstrous creatures. In fact, one was said to have washed ashore in 887 AD, that was 160 feet in length, with hair 18 feet long and a nose and fingers each 7 feet long. We'll touch in a moment that mermaids tend to race storms in order to sink ships, and truly, if this one wanted to sink a ship, I don't think she would need a storm. Where do you find a mermaid? Well, that one, probably in a very deep patch of ocean. But as a general rule, you might find them anywhere there's water. So last week, the Benvarri tended to stay in the seas. But mermaids, as a general rule, can be found in rivers, they can be found in lakes, they can be found in lochs, as long as it's a relatively large body of water, and relatively really is relative, as you'll see in our story this week, you may find a mermaid in it, so be careful. Mermaids are also known to live in underground caves occasionally, underwater caves, goodness, underground, and also to be found on rocks by the seashore or out to sea. Are they dangerous? Yes, they're dangerous. If you see a mermaid, please try and stay away from her, or at least have your wits about you. So mermaids, they like to drown people, they may be known to devour people, they like to seduce people, but often with an ultimate aim of drowning them. There are some nice stories. There's a beautiful poem which I will look up for you guys and try to find, I'll try to post it with this video, about a mermaid who simply falls in love with a young man and forgets that he can't breathe underwater like she can. So sometimes perhaps their reputation for drowning humans is a little it's not ill-deserved, they certainly drown them, but it may not be as intentional as all that. As I alluded to earlier, mermaids are also known to raise gigantic storms that can sink entire fleets of ships. So on the whole, dangerous. How do you survive an encounter with a mermaid? Easy, just stay away from all bodies of water forever. I'm kidding. Not so easy, especially if you make your living on the sea. What you can do is just be wary. If you happen to come across a fish-tailed, human upper body creature, you may want to think about whether any actions that you feel like doing are you actually doing them of your own volition? Is the impulse to do that actually coming from you? Particularly if the impulse is jump in the water. Because mermaids have a lot of allurements up their sleeve, and they love nothing better than to allure people into the water with them. Usually to a nefarious end. As we will touch on in a story next week, it's possible that mermaids can also be driven back by cold iron. You will see that I have got an illustration up behind me of a mermaid by the amazing Amanda Sartor, who is an incredible artist. And I suggest you go and check out her stuff. Now we're going to go into story time. This week's story is Launty and the Mermaid. Not to be confused with a story from next week about Looty and the Mermaid. Very different mermaids, very different men. So the young Lord of Launty in Scotland had been off hunting one day with his two faithful greyhounds and his faithful manservant. And as they were returning from the day's hunt, they had to pass within a short distance of a pond, not 3 miles from the castle. They were coming through the trees towards this pond, or this small lake, when Launty heard a cry coming from the lake, and it sounded to him like a woman who was drowning in the lake. So he spurred his horse through the trees, and as he pulled up on the shore, he saw this woman struggling not too far from the shore, and her hair was all tangled around her, and she seemed to be in the very act of going under the water. Launty, of course, being a chivalrous gentleman, leapt off his horse and immediately waded in to go to her as she called out, with her having seemed to recognize him, "Launty, help me, Launty!" And then the waves closed over her head. Now, just as Launty was reaching for her golden hair, which was lying in hanks on the surface, he was grasped from behind by his manservant, who dragged him back to shore. And as Launty would have dashed the man aside and leapt back into the water, the manservant said, "Bide a wee minute, Launty. Can you not see? That wailing woman is none other than the mermaid, God save us." And the moment the manservant said this, Launty saw the truth of it. Who else would be out in that lake at that time of day, calling for Launty so specifically as he happened to come past to rescue her? And indeed, the manservant's assertion was proven true the moment Launty went to mount back on his horse, for the mermaid rose up halfway out of the water and said to him, "Launty, Launty," in a voice of deafening disappointment and menace. "Were it not for your man, I'd have had your heart's blood skirl in my pan." And to skirl, as we may not know, is to crackle and bubble in a very hot temperature. Not one of the nicer mermaids. So thank you for joining me this week. I hope you enjoyed that story. Do not forget to check out my website on Sunday, where you'll find a full write-up of all the information about mermaids that we've touched on today, as well as seeing an illustration that I have done of Launty and the Mermaid. Don't forget to join me next week. Yes, it will be mermaids again. Yes, it's another very cool story. All right, thank you. See you later, everyone.